Okie dokie. So the first thing I want to point out is that it's totally okay if you didn't get all the way through because, all those steps are still there. They're not going anywhere. It was just to give you a chance to practice with the different things in there. I would like you to check out to the end of this adding users code. So it's where, in a perfect world, you would have gotten to by the end of the page. And just to make sure we're all on the same page and everything's consistent, if everyone could follow these instructions, that would be awesome. So this, I just slacked it out, and I would just look in there. And so this is just going to create a new branch where you start off with the code that, it's going to create a new branch with the code where you would have ended up in this section. And yeah, just 2 notes on here. If you get an error, then add and commit first. And then this -b in the get checkout part is very important. Oh, I guess it doesn't really matter. I was thinking mostly of the drivers, but if you want to too, sure. Whatever floats your goat. Yeah, so when you're done with that, now even if you're not done with that, I'm going to keep on trucking forward. And if you have Git issues, then we can troubleshoot those in a bit when we go on to the next section. But now I just want to ask you guys some questions about what you did. So let's see, Christine and Ryan, I heard you guys talking about resources versus resource. Can you tell everyone what the difference is between resources and resource?
I could tell you what we found.
Okay, sounds good.
So we were kind of going along this thought too, that the difference between a resource and resources is to declare that only one of the resources will ever exist.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, our session resource, there should only ever be one active at a time, and I imagine that's where we're going to keep track of all our user data.
Yeah.
Which is why we don't want more than one user to exist in one session.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's also honestly a bit more specific than I was looking for. Like at a higher level, the big difference between doing resource and resources in your roots file is that resources creates an index page and a show page, whereas resource does not. That's really the big difference. If you do resource says artists, it'll create an artist show page and an artist index page. If you just do resource artist, it will not. The implication being you would only have one, so it's kind of redundant. It's not really a point in having an index page, because an index page is supposed to show a bunch, but you're just going to have one. So that's the difference between those two. Yep, that's pretty much it. Yep. And it also affects things like whether you call it, like you wouldn't go to artists show anymore, you go to artist show. So it affects the plurality and stuff a little bit as well.
That's probably backwards, but could you accomplish the same thing by just not declaring an index function?
Yep. But, it's Ruby, so it's all about, 8,000 ways of doing any one given thing. Okay, true or false? Every controller has to have a model and vice versa. Mohammed, I was talking with you about that. Is it true? False. Yes, it is false. Not every controller has to have a model. Not every model has to have a controller. A model is just a class. And so you would use a model, sometimes it's just nice to keep everything all packaged up in a class. And a controller, not every controller has to have a model. You just have a controller for when you want to be able to make roots somewhere. So, for instance, a lot of people want to have a splash page on their app or a welcome page. In order to get there, you have to have a controller for it. So often people create a welcome controller. You're not going to have a welcome model. You're not going to create a new welcome. It really doesn't have anything to do with the database at all. It's just a way of making a page show up. If you want a root to show up, it needs to have a controller. Okay, what's the difference between the sessions controller and the users controller? Let's try this one. This is where it starts getting trickier. Sanjay, how about you?
Yeah, it's trickier, but session controllers seem to just pertain, like Ryan was touching on, to that session. So it creates this user in that session, and then when you log out, it destroys it.
Well, it doesn't create a user, it creates a session.
Right.
Yep.
Session for the user.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Yep. And so session, session is, it means here what it means in English. It's like an instance of someone using your app, someone's session with your app. Like I have a session with my therapist, someone has a session with your app. So same kind of meaning. Okay, so this is sort of a trick question. How does this password field protect you from malware and hackers? Easy.
It doesn't protect you from hackers. Malware protects you from hackers that are like shoulder surfing.
Mhm.
They'll just put asterisks in the block while if you do a special element, it's still going to show you what's actually typed there.
Yep. But literally all this does is, you all have seen these before. All it does is it just changes your characters into dots or asterisks. There is no security beyond that. The only thing it protects against is someone who happens to be literally, like physically looking over your shoulder. So if you're worried about, someone on another computer somewhere, if they can somehow hack into your computer, it doesn't really protect you. So don't rely on this thing for don't put a password field in there and feel like you're a badass who knows how to prevent hackers, because it doesn't really work that way. And the last one is, how could this be dried up? There are 3 views that are almost identical. Actually, there are a couple of instances of views that are almost identical. There?
With the user finds the ID,
Well, so that's in the controller. That is actually something that could be dried up, but I was looking specifically for views that could be dried up. Anyone see anything? There are 3 views, 3 HTML.erb files in there that are almost identical. And those are the forms. So your sign up, sign in, and user edit page are almost the exact same thing. There's almost no difference on there. I think the difference is just the heading across the top. So that would be an example of something we could put in a partial. And I think you talked about those during the views and controllers class. So it doesn't really go into what we're discussing today, but it's just one thing you could do if you wanted to dry it up. Mohammed?
Well, for the password field, how would we protect it from inspect element?
You can't really, honestly. Yeah, no, you really can't. You can't protect anything that is physically shown to you on your browser. If someone somehow has access to inspect element in the first place on your computer, then you've got some pretty big fish to fry. So, yeah, what you can do is you can protect it when that data is sent somewhere. You can't really protect what actually shows up in here, but when you're sending the data, you can encrypt it, you can do other things to it as well.
Okay, so you're not expected to.
Okay, and then a couple shortcomings of this user system. How are you told if you entered the wrong password? Who wants to take a stab at that? These are also sort of trick questions down here. Brendan, how about you? What feedback would a user of this app get to indicate they entered the wrong password?
They get a Rails error. I didn't actually test it.
What? They don't actually. They don't get a Rails error.
Puts wrong password. Okay.
Yeah, so is a user going to see puts wrong password?
Not unless they're using Prime or something.
Yeah, not unless they're you. So this doesn't give you any feedback whatsoever if you enter the wrong password. Well, okay, it gives you feedback, but you're not your user, so that's not very helpful. Yeah, it does that too, but there's nothing that says nah, you entered the wrong password. It's just oh, well, shit, I'm redirected to this page. This app is lame. I have no idea why. So yeah, that's one shortcoming. How are users' passwords protected? We already sort of talked about that. They're not. You got that password field on there. There's that. But aside from that, it just stores their passwords as plain text in the database. My password is hello, then I go to the database, I'm going to see hello in there. So that's, theoretically, people won't have access to your database, but it's still something you need to protect against. And another thing to consider is if you're like me and you've been using the exact same password for pretty much everything since 7th grade, if people know one of your passwords, they know all of your passwords. So while it's just you, and you all are ethical people, so I know you wouldn't steal your users' passwords, but if you have some disgruntled employee, that can be kind of a big problem because they could really easily get into someone else's account. So the reason I'm pointing this out is to say that what we're doing today, adding in users, it is not secure. So we're not encrypting passwords or anything. Doing it secure is almost the exact same process. There are just a couple additional steps, but things look almost identical. The reason why we're not going into encryption and all of that stuff is because in the past when we've done it, I would say like 75% of the problems we troubleshooted during the Rails project week was because of encryption and people having too much security. So an app that has no security is still a perfectly good app. Security that doesn't have an app isn't really anything. It means you have a login screen that saves your password and that's it. So the reason why we're not going into this, it's actually the first time we haven't gone into encryption and all that stuff, because you guys are here to learn how to make apps. If you want to get into security, that's something that you can definitely specialize in and something that you can learn more of later on. But the important thing is being able to make apps and actually do web development. Security is just one little part of it. That said, next week we are going to have a mini lesson on adding encryption and all of that fancy stuff to an app through this gem called Devise. So keep an eye out for that. Let's see. And the last one is, what's different between being signed in and not signed in? So from a user perspective, how does this app change as it exists right now from when you're signed in to when you're not signed in? Yeah, exactly. It doesn't change at all. So signing in does diddly squat. It puts something in the database, but that's it. So these are the things that we're going to be fixing as we go. Let me stop there for questions. Adrian.
You said that to clean up the code that was repetitive, put it in a partial. I may just be not recalling, but is that something that goes in the applications view, or what's a partial?
So a partial is, it's basically a little piece of, here, you know what, let me show you one in Garnet, actually. This isn't really related to what we're doing today, so don't let me get too sidetracked. I'm just going to show this real quick. Let's see, how about, all right, here we go. So we have this memberships table. This is where we see actually, you know what, let me show, no, that's fine. So this is where we show all of the people who are in a cohort. So all of you guys are in the WDI8 membership table. We use this table a whole bunch of times at several different places throughout the app. So what you can do in here is you can make sort of a mini view. It's called a partial view because you include it in other views. And so this one right here, really the only difference is that by convention they start with an underscore. And then you say render partial, and then the name of the view. So here it would be member row or something. And that's it. And then it just plops that right into whatever your view is. Oops. So that is a partial. Other questions?
And then when you write a numbered row, so the row is referring to the partial row there, and members is
Oh,
something
shit, I'm sorry.
else,
So here, let me do one that's actually on there. I'll do table. So you just take the name of the file, forget the underscore at the beginning and the .html.erb at the end, and that's it. Pat, you had a question.
Yeah. In the sessions controller, I didn't really understand what the definition was doing. It looked like it's just creating new user instances.
Okay, so sessions controller. Oh, right here. This line, right here. Yeah. So what this is doing is so whenever you create a form, for instance, is the edit form in here? Yeah. So all of these have at user equals user.find. When you go to the edit form, it already has the username and the password pre-filled on there for you. When you look at the edit form, it's already there. If you look at the edit artist form, the artist name is right there, the artist's nationality is right there. That's because of this. What you do is you basically pass in this @user to the form, and then if you say, hey, this form has a nationality field, it's going to check to see if @user has a nationality. And if it does, it's going to display it in the form. If it doesn't, like with this one up here at the top, this is sort of like a dummy user right here. onto user all. This one right here. If it doesn't have that field, then it's just going to display blank. So if it does have a nationality field, it'll put that in the field. It'll make that show up on the page. If it doesn't, it'll just be blank. So this is basically just a way of making things show up on the form if they exist, and it's just sort of convention. Right?
When does the application controller actually, or the not the application, the sessions controller actually get like called?
That is when, let's take a look at the roots. Okay, so resource session, I think there's like a new session path. Yeah, so there's that, and this is the sign-in path. So like the sign-in link, it goes to the new session path, which goes to the session's new method. And same thing for these guys. Okay, so I know that we're going over a lot here, lots of terminology. And again, it's just to sort of like get you guys thinking about this stuff with the stipulation that you can always come back and look at this thing later on if you want. But why don't we take a break there, and we'll come back at 35. So that's 7 minutes, 8 minutes.